Hello, everybody. This is Toadboy MtG, and this deck is Flicker Humans, a pioneer deck centralized around flickering humans, or just a little bit. There's a lot of ETB synergy in here with Charming Prince. You can get a lot of value out of him, especially because his Scry 2 allows you to get your lands. But let's start this off with the one drops being Dauntless Bodyguard, 1 mana, 2/1 that can protect your creatures. It's always been a good aggressive card, and in the late game, it's still a little bit of value on the board and can somewhat save you from a board wipe. It can only protect one of your creatures, but if that creature is a 5/5, then you're in for the races. Then there's Kytheon, Hero of Akros, a legendary creature, and at the end of combat, if it and two other creatures have attacked this combat, exile him and transform him into his Planeswalker form. And for 3 mana, you can give him Indestructible. That's not to be overlooked. Another 1 mana 2/1, still a very aggressive body that can protect himself. And when he flips into a Planeswalker, it should be GG as long as you have a board. You just paid 1 mana for a 4/4 that can help your creatures be indestructible. It's just really good. It's good to flip. Also, it has synergy with Gideon of the Trials in our sideboard. Whisper Squad, 1 mana 1/1 that can tutor himself up for 2 mana, multiple copies of him up. This deck runs a total of 10 lords in the main board, and being able to pay 2 mana for a 2/2, like just free, is actually pretty good. What people are not understanding about this card is that people will pay 3 mana for 2/1/1s. They will. As for a token deck or a deck that wants to go wide, 3 mana for 2/1/1s for your creature type sometimes can be pretty worth it. This is a 1 mana thing that can actually become that. It scales well with the game. As far as 1-drops go, that's pretty good. We're playing a total of 10 1-drops. I usually run 8 before Ikoria dropped, but I wanted to find room to test Whisper Squad in the deck. He seems pretty powerful, especially with cards that care about other humans entering the battlefield and such like that. Then we got Charming Prince, as we talked about before. When it enters the battlefield, you either scry 2, you gain 3 life, or you may flicker one of your creatures and they come back at the next end step. It's a really powerful card in my opinion. We only play a 3 of because we don't want just multiple of these in our opening hand. They're kind of slow, but they can give us the edge against a aggro deck, or they can help us flicker some really important creatures in order to do stuff like bounce creatures back to their hands, and helps us scry 2 to make sure we hit our land drops. Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, this is an energy-based card, so when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, you draw a card and lose a life. If you can hit that energy thing consistently, this is basically a better Dark Confidant, aka Bob, and that already is a powerful card. So having a pseudo version and Pioneer is automatically worth it. We only run 3 of it. You could change around the numbers in here if you really like this card. You can also, there's another energy creature I'll show you later that you might bump up the copies if you bump up the copies of this. We run a 4 of Kitesail Freebooter. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand and you choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. Exile that card until it leaves the battlefield. This card got a little worse with Throne of Eldraine. The issue with Throne of Eldraine is it introduced adventure creatures that can remove your creatures. So against a Bone Crusher Giant or a Murderous Rider, if that's the only removal they have in their hand, this card gets pretty bad because you can't take the removal. The whole point of Kitesail Freebooter really and Pioneer is the fact that it can come down and take their removal and then use basically 2 for 1 of them getting a flying creature and taking the removal. And even when they have 2 removal, it makes this a lightning rod for their removal, which is pretty good. It makes them spend their mana weirdly. It can really help you, and having flying with having lords can be helpful because it can get you in that last little bit of damage you need against other creature decks. Next up, we have Thalia's Lieutenant. Without Thalia's Lieutenant, this deck just would suck. You need Thalia's Lieutenant in this deck. It is probably the most powerful card in this deck other than Collected Company. When it enters the battlefield, put a +++ counter on each other human you control, and whenever another human enters the battlefield and you control, put a +++ counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. This card is even played in the modern version of humans, which this deck's trying to emulate in a way. It can do a lot of the similar things. On that note, this card is just one of the best lords we have. A 2 mana lord is a very powerful card. Next up, we have Benalish Marshal, 3 triple white, so that makes our mana base a little hard because all of our lands have to have white for us to play Benalish Marshal as a 4 of. And it says other creatures you control get +1/+1. If you have 2 creatures on the battlefield before this, you're paying 3 mana for 5 power, which is already really good. If you have other lords, it scales up and it gets really good. Along with General Kudro of Drannith, this card is very powerful as well. It does the same thing as Benalish Marshal for us, except it also says whenever it or another human enters battlefield under our control, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. This is very good against the decks that plan to play out of their graveyard. It helps against a lot of things, to be honest, and it will come up a lot of the time. And for 2 mana, you may sacrifice 2 humans and destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. We have been having some issues against green-black decks, not Delirium, but the green-black Stompy deck, because unless we can make our Thalia's Lieutenants just 5/5s and 6/6s, we end up getting ran over by them very quickly into the late game. But unless we can hit some Reflector Mages. What this card is really good against is Whisper Squad, because you're going to end up getting multiple creatures out of your Whisper Squads. If you need to sacrifice them late game, you can without getting multiple 1-for-1. Then we got Reflector Mage. This is a good card to be flickering with Charming Prince, because when it enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to their hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells of the same name as that creature until end of turn. I really want to be playing a 4 of this card. I've just been having issues with how we need to situate the deck. This card is very much one of the most powerful cards in the deck. One card this deck really needs a reprint of is Meddling Mage, so we can get Meddling Mage in this deck. But other than that, this is probably one of our best cards and one of the only reasons we play blue in the deck at all. And then we have a Lonely Copy of Rogue Refiner. If you don't want to play this card, you don't have to. But its ability is very powerful. Entering the battlefield, drawing you a card, and giving you 2 energy, which you can feed into your Glint-Sleeve Siphoner to draw more cards, is pretty good in the late game. It is very, very hard on mana-wise because all of our lands do add blue, so we have to have 2 lands that add for it, but we can cast them pretty consistently. Then we have Collected Company. For 4 mana, you look at the top 6, and you may grab 2 creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, and put them onto the battlefield, and the rest of you bottom of your library. This card, along with having so many lords, we can consistently get 2 lords out of this. Let's say we only have 1 creature on the battlefield. We only have like 1 Whisper Squad. We only have a 1/1. If we go ahead and we hit a Benalish Marshal on a General Kudro, we got like 10 power off of a Collected Company, where we only paid 4 mana for it across multiple bodies. Collected Company in this deck is very insane. If you hit Reflector Mage and a Charming Prince, in that turn you get 4 power plus you bounce 2 other creatures for 4 mana. That's also very powerful. If you hit Kitesail Freebooter and something else, you get to attack their hand. You might even make your Kitesail Freebooter be really big, and it just scales really well, especially the more creatures you have late game. It's just very powerful. We only play 2 Aether Hubs. This card can get really hard to deal with because of our Benalish Marshals, because we'd have to save that energy to play the Benalish Marshal, but that's why we only play a 2 of it. If you can turn 1 a black source and turn 2 into Aether Hub and Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, you're guaranteed to draw that next card on that next turn, which with this deck we want to be doing that. It's a very good synergy. I really wish we had more room for energy in the deck because it is very powerful with Glint-Sleeve. Concealed Courtyard, it's a very fast land, and we need both white and black. If you notice, we're mostly white and black. 2 Godless Shrine, again, we need the white and black. A single Hallowed Fountain because we need that blue, which we can use for the Reflector Mages or the Rogue Refiners. A playset of Mana Confluence because, well, we have to have all that mana. 1 Plains, 4 Temple Garden, and 4 Unclaimed Territory. This one is basically the bad Cavern of Souls, but a bad Cavern of Souls is still a Cavern of Souls. We have 2 Pithing Needle. This will help us against Planeswalkers plus Walking Ballista. It's just a very good card. I think it's not being played as much as it should be in Pioneer, but at the same time, like the Pioneer meta is very weird right now. I think people are valuing certain decks way more than they should be. Lavinia, this card stops a lot of decks. This card can help stop the the Lotus Breach deck because they go ahead and they try to cast a whole bunch of spells, but if they add 6 mana to their mana pool and they go to play a 5-drop, they only have 2 lands because they have like 2 Lotus Fields out. They can't combo off, and that's about basically it. And this is non-creature spells, so that even works on planeswalkers, so they can't just go ahead and cast like a big old Ugin or something like unfairly. Rest in peace. We might go down some of these because we're playing the General Kudro, but there are some graveyard decks that we just really hate, such as that Lotus Breach deck. Tomik, again, good against Lotus Breach. You can make your sideboard however you want. There are so many good humans. Fiendslayer Paladin, this is good against the aggro decks. We sometimes have an issue against them because sometimes they just kill all of our creatures off and then get in for that last little bit of damage while we hurt ourselves with Mana Confluence. Getting into the trials, this is good against decks that their only win condition is just saying I win the game. So if you can get one of this down and get the emblem down, you might be able to just take that game away. Kambal, this is good against Lotus Breach. This is good against several other decks as well. And then Sin Collector, good against instant and sorcery decks, especially if you're trying not to get board wiped. If you can turn 2 Kitesail, turn 3 Sin Collector, turn 4 bounce the Sin Collector, do it again. You can take decks like that like straight out of the format against you, and it is very powerful. There are several other versions of humans that I will be willing to upload later, like one that focuses on keywords. But this has been Toadboy MTG, and I will see you guys in the next video.